Welcome to The Mystic Lens, a podcast by Current Collective Church where we explore the spiritual path through stories of transformation from real people in our community and explorations of Christian tradition through a mystic perspective. Our hope is that these conversations will help us feel even more connected to God, ourselves, and each other, inspiring us to live more expansively from the well of living water within. To learn more or connect with us further, visit thisiscurrent.org.
Chase,
Luke,
welcome to
the Mystic Lens.
Here we are, dude. Finally, man.
Great to be here.
And I just want to start this episode like we do for people who are local and actually involved in the current community. Just learn a little bit more and let people know the story of how you found your way into the space and how we became friends and have taken some deep dives, and now we're sitting in my living room recording and all of that. And so I'm curious, where would be a good place that you feel like you would like to begin in your story? You've shared a lot with me in the past. I want to make sure that we're able to do some deep dives here, but I want people to get familiar with who you are. If somebody said, where did it all begin for you? What does that mean for you from a spiritual sense?
So I went to a Christian school, like 5th to 8th grade. And it was a Lutheran school here in Vista. And
that's fun.
And then I went to a public high school. In 9th grade, I went to Rancho Buena Vista. So private school to public school. Big jump from 20 kids in the 8th grade to 900 kids in 9th grade. From a church like school to a public school, like
it's a big jump, dude.
Big jump. So basically it kind of introduced me to other worldviews in a big way. And
in a time that you're really changing in life, like I was a youth pastor, by the way. I don't know if you know that or not.
Yes.
Okay. So, and I was in 9th grade before too myself, but
you were there.
Yeah.
Well, in 9th grade, you're so high school is kind of rebellious years anyway. So everyone's kind of thinking about rebelling against the authorities, especially church.
Yes.
And so,
especially Lutheran church.
So we were all thinking about, this part of their teaching doesn't make sense. This part of their teaching doesn't make sense. You know what? Maybe none of it makes sense. Maybe it's all made up. So you go through a period of far away from God.
And that happened to you in high school?
Yeah.
What were your parents thinking around that time?
Oh, they were scared for my soul.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially my aunt. She was really worried about me, and she was not very close by, so she was emailing me Bible verses and telling me things. There's a lot of apologetics too. There's a lot of arguments for God that was also being introduced to me by people. So then
caring people, by the way, I will say,
I love my family for caring for my soul. I'm so glad that they do. So lucky that they do.
Totally.
So then college, taking philosophy classes, I started a podcast called Philosophy, which you were on.
Yes.
You were you would think if I started this podcast 10 years ago, there'd be more episodes. You were episode 3 or 2. So,
dude, by the way, Philosophy is a brilliant name.
Dude.
The minute that you told me the name of your podcast, I was like, I wish I had that.
Yeah.
That was
we
so
have it.
good, dude.
I feel like we're a team. So
we
can do more on Philosophy, more on Mystic Lens, because recently I've been enamored with mysticism. And so more recently, hearing from you and others that being a mystic just means you are, believe in a closeness to God.
Yeah.
Mystics have a closeness, or they've discovered a closeness with God.
Yeah.
And God always seemed so far away when I was younger. So far away, in fact, that he seemed invisible. And a lot of people feel that way, especially atheists.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, if God is real, where is he?
Right.
I was taught that he's in the sky. I don't see him. We've been to space.
Yeah.
We've sent up rockets. We've been to the moon. I was thinking on the way here, the Our Father who art in heaven.
Yeah.
And heaven means sky.
Yeah.
And I think when we went to space, it was Nope, he's not up here.
Yeah. I actually just listened to, or I was reading in a book, Thomas Keating, I believe it was, book, who's a great mystic. He developed like centering prayer and stuff. And he said, most people would prefer "Our Father who art in heaven, please stay there." It's like,
yes.
And there's this like feeling of this distant God who's not engaged in any way, shape, or form,
Especially when bad things happen.
Right. Yeah. So for you, like in some of the stuff we just know each other and have had conversation, and then you were talking to me through some of like the questionnaire beforehand, like you growing up with this Lutheran background, this very structured organizational, experience of God, and then you beginning to explore that, follow your curiosity, push the boundaries maybe in some ways. Like, because you were just talking about how mysticism has become this recent thing that you've been experiencing more of. Maybe for some people that are in the community that are listening to this, or people from afar who connect with us, they've had a similar sort of trajectory. They've had a very structured upbringing, maybe even a conservative and even strict upbringing. And then they follow this pathway of unfoldment. I'm curious if you can kind of point to some of those turning points for you. You mentioned a few, like in high school, the rebellion, and college, the classes that come with that, but like even now, like, you're probably around my age, right?
We are like the same age.
Yeah. I think we talked about this. So like now you're in your mid 30s.
Yes.
And like what got you from it being, maybe I'm letting the cat out of the bag, but there seems to be, at least in my life, a turning point whenever it changes from not changes, but it's
evolves.
It's not just an intellectual fun thing.
Right.
It becomes something that's much more personal and transcendent and interpersonal, like the way I actually move through life and engage my work and my family and everything. It's not just this fun YouTube deep dive.
No.
Like how did that evolve for you and become more integrated?
Yeah. So something that Bob Peck talked about is like there's almost like three phases. He told me this. He's like, oh yeah, millennials, we go through like three phases, like the coming up in the church. The second is like the rebellion. And then the third is the coming back to God in a different way, a whole new way. And it's kind of like the hero's journey. You have to leave home, to come back and find what you've been looking for all along. And so, yeah, obviously college becomes intellectual. You're learning about things, and then you have to make it real, integrate what you've learned. And I've heard you talk a lot about dropping into the heart space, and how that kind of represents the realness. So you can understand things intellectually, but to integrate it is to know it.
Yeah.
And so that's like what they call gnosis.
Yeah.
Real knowledge is understanding.
Which your Lutheran church probably didn't teach you that word, did it?
No. Exactly. It's so crazy. I look back.
They're probably scared. I mean, a lot of people are scared of the word Gnostic or Gnosis.
Exactly.
They're
the heretics.
Right.
And I remember like going through something called catechism. And it's like this training, like when you're like fifth grade, you go through this Luther's catechism, which is like learning the basic doctrines of the church. And yeah, they don't teach you a lot of things that you learn later on. Like they're like, this is pretty much all you have to know. And we're like, really great. I think I know everything now. Yeah. And it's like, then you learn more and you're like, what? They didn't know all of this? There's way more knowledge. Like, especially in today's day and age, we live in the age of information. We can learn more about Eastern religions than ever before.
Right.
And it becomes glaringly obvious that as soon as you start to think about Protestant Christianity from a critical perspective, you go, okay, so the Christians are going to heaven, everyone else is going to hell. There's like, the world is a certain percentage Christian and the rest are going to hell. So that's most of the population of Earth is going to hell. Yeah. And I've heard the argument before. It's like, if God is working for our souls and the devil's working for our souls, then the devil's winning in that scenario.
Right.
He's like winning more of the souls. So it doesn't make sense even from an intellectual perspective. So Yeah,
or even a heart space perspective.
Exactly.
Right?
Of course not. That's more so actually.
Yeah.
Heart space perspective. So then you go through this phase of like, there must be some truth in these other religions. Like billions of Hindu people, like saw all these, Buddhist people, like they have some wisdom in their teachings. And so
when did you start to learn about some other philosophy or religion and spirituality?
College.
Yeah.
Yeah. College is all about learning. For me, it was
And that's why Christians typically, and I say this sympathetically, because I am not wanting to just completely, shit on Christianity as a whole. I mean, because I still find myself a part of it, a fringe part of it, admittedly, but I still consider myself like, if people might not consider me in the group, but I consider myself still as part of the group.
Because we follow the teachings of Christ.
Yes.
We're Christian.
Right. And that's what it means. Christian. It's, if you follow this way, then you're in. And I think that it's a much broader view, which we can get into as well. But like Christians, just as like, that's sort of as a disclaimer, they're often fearful of kids going to college and university. University becomes the enemy. Therefore, intellect and intelligence becomes the enemy, because knowledge always has a way of, when they say knowledge is power, it's not just a cliche. Like, because that means you are knowing something that could potentially dismantle power structures. And that's whenever things become, people become fearful of knowledge itself. And that's why when you have the Dark Ages, right? Because that time in history, the Catholic Church was spreading everywhere and just completely, just quite literally putting into flame anything in its way.
Destroying the competition.
Exactly. And just leveling the playing field, and I just feel like you telling about this story, I think for many people that listen, they will have a similar experience maybe in college or elsewhere. I actually didn't go to university or anything, other than YouTube University. But I went to a Bible college, but that's another story. I feel like for many people, they were opened up, and one of two things happens. And I kind of, obviously you would be sitting here with me if one of them happened, but one of the two is that people get fearful and scared of seeing things through a different angle. And then they retreat really hard, and they become almost even more zealous in evangel or whatever form of Christianity.
Yeah, you know what they say? It's like when you get into the deep end, you can't touch the bottom.
Right.
And so you might come back to the shallow end.
Yep. And that's natural. Or you learn how to swim.
Yeah.
And some people don't want to learn how to swim, and that's okay. I have friends in my life that think that I'm, definitely off the deep end.
Off the deep end.
And it's like, yeah.
There's a reason these phrases are in use.
Exactly, dude. And so I'm like, so either you retreat back or you learn how to swim, or some people just kind of drown. I have some friends that have certainly like lost their
Gone
marbles.
off the deep end for real. Yes.
And
you can lose yourself in the darkness.
Right. But like there is to me, I think, and you're a dad, and you have kids, and
we have certain groundings in the real world that ground us, bring us back to reality.
They do, and they teach you these things, and it's like, but there is like this seeing your kids grow into autonomy. Like the success of a parent is not that you replicated all of the things that are you in them necessarily. It's that you taught them how to be independent individuals as humans. That's my interpretation of success.
I've learned more in the past 8 years since my son is born than I did in college, for sure.
Yeah, right. And it's like the natural progression from being a dad with a child, or even your own spiritual progression, is independence and maturity. But people, when they get into that, to learn how to swim means that I have developed a skill to be able to navigate this on my own. And so for you, that happened in college.
Combined with everything I learned in middle school, I would say that some of the things that were, because you're, of course, more like a sponge when you're younger. So you're picking up all this awesome knowledge that I was given from 5th to 8th grade. Like, I don't at all think that was all lies. It's actually all fundamentally true on such a deep level that I come back to it and I go, oh, they taught me about, what's it called? The armor of faith or something like that. Breastplate of this, helmet of that.
Breastplate of righteousness. And
Yes.
yeah.
So, when you're going off into the dark forest, off into the deep end, away from home in the hero's journey, you have to put on this armor of faith, of righteousness, to survive out there, because there are monsters in the world.
Yeah.
And so, like, some of that stuff was so deeply ingrained that I had some kind of protection to go out into the wilderness.
There's something really good about that, man, because it's not dismissing your upbringing or your conditioning. It's alchemizing it. It's using it. It's turning these things into something that's beneficial,
integrating
for your growth. Yes.
Yeah,
so
I love.
Like,
so
how did that? Yeah.
You've integrated the word alchemy into a church setting, which is what we should all do.
Yeah.
It's what I've been looking for my whole life, is a church that would integrate ideas that are outside of the, this small little tradition. There's other traditions with wisdom in them.
Yeah.
And so alchemy is huge. That's what I've been doing a deep dive on in the past 3-4 years, is like, wow, alchemy is such a long tradition, going back just as long as Christianity, going all the way back to Egypt.
Yes.
It's such and it's so ingrained in our society in ways that we don't know. I mean, the tradition of alchemy and Rosicrucians and Hermeticism, like, this is kind of the occult studies, but occult means hidden. And people are, again, worried about the occult because they think the people in power are the occult, and they have evil, sinister ideas. Partly true and partly not. Like, people in power, they do understand occult wisdom. They do understand the power of manifestation, the power of how to get done in the world what you need to get done.
Yeah.
We're not taught that in church, because the church is really focused on subduing your own power and like falling in line and doing what you're told. And it's sort of about control. And you kind of realize that when you're in that rebellious stage, you're like, I don't want to be controlled anymore.
Yes.
And then you come back to Christ in the later third phase of life, understanding like, okay, I have to control my urges. I have to control myself. Self-control means having temperance, and temperance is a virtue that's taught in church. And just been like integrating these ideas into like my own worldview, because I have to have a worldview that makes sense.
Yeah.
I can't like just live going like, well, who knows?
Yeah.
Like, I want to know
Yeah.
what's going on here. And so some of us have that deep desire to learn what's going on here, and they're the scientists and the alchemists.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason we have chemistry, you know what I mean? Like, there's still this study that happens. So you mentioned a bunch of stuff right here that I feel like would be super fun to dive in on. Because the beauty of all of this is how, again, we keep coming back to this word integrate and bringing it all together, that nothing necessarily is exclusionary, but it's all helping inform each other. And I think that is a sign of spiritual maturity. Paul said a lot of great things, had a lot of things that, whatever. We'll leave Paul alone for right now. I riff on him a lot. But one of the things he said is about his purpose is bringing everyone into spiritual maturity. And I feel like there's an integrated being able to pull these things together to create a cohesive worldview, because we all have one. Even if we don't intellectually think about it, everybody's operating from a story. And that's really what we're getting down to, is how do we shape the story and see meaning and purpose in our life. And you mentioned about the occult. And I remember I grew up in, the charismatic church community. And that was a branch off of Pentecostalism. And so it's like everything is spiritual warfare all the time. Like, there are active demons that are,
world.
Yes, you got to talk to your mic, dude.
In the world.
And it's like, the occult was something, there was this huge scare in the 80s and 90s for like Satanism and devil worship and occult things and all of this. And you'd see books all the time about, giving the devil horns at rock concerts.
It's huge now. I mean, online, everybody like interprets these YouTube videos. They're like, oh, look at this guy. He's a devil worshiper. Look at Eminem. He's doing this.
Right.
Look at this celebrity. She's got an upside down necklace. And it always turns out to be a cross. It's never an upside down cross. Whenever they're like, upside down cross. She worships the devil. It's like, it's just a cross.
Yeah.
So there's
we're all reading our own stories into what we see, you know, but I'm curious with you, did you have some of that like framework?
Yeah. My mom was like always worried about like the Ouija board. Like we had a Ouija board. And then it was like,
which those things still creep me out.
Yeah. You're contacting spirits. You're letting in the devil. And my aunt and my uncle are basically the most fundamentalist part of my family. My uncle was a Catholic and my aunt was a Protestant. And what a combination, because
you get the full spectrum.
When you get down to it, Catholics believe that Protestants are going to hell.
Yep.
And then their own kids said, wait, Dad, you think Mom's going to hell? Like, you know, they were figuring things out when they were growing up. And yes, when I was growing up, like my aunt was saying, like, don't touch a Ouija board. You're allowing evil spirits into the room. Mm-hmm. And again, coming back to it, it's like, yeah, there are evil spirits in the world. I do believe that, but I don't believe that they are in the Ouija board per se. I have I don't know, just a different understanding.
They're all tools that open you up, and texts are tools, and I'm not condoning Ouija board necessarily, but I'm saying that like what I hear you saying too is that like it all comes back to the heart and the intention, and to me it comes back to like the authority of what we have in that space. Maybe we could talk about dark energy here in a moment, but like I'm curious, like, so from that framework and that worldview, you began to be opened up into having a curiosity, not only to just other religions and spiritualities, but symbolism, and even like your tattoos that are sacred
deeply
geometry.
symbolic.
You wrote a book, right?
Yeah.
About sacred geometry and all of this.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit to how that entered into your life and how you ended up reflecting? What I want to get to is that, again, integrating where you've been, how it didn't just dissolve and go away, but it's now a fresh expression based on new knowledge,
a better understanding of where I came from. Like coming home in the hero's journey, I've heard you say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And yeah, that's the truth. There's wisdom in the Bible. And like I've come back to the Bible with fresh eyes and finding nuggets of wisdom all over the place. One of my favorite Instagram creators is Dan McClellan.
Oh, yeah.
He's like a Bible scholar that he knows the Bible, I think, better than anyone I've seen. And, you know, talk about dark energy and contacting the dead. He has this great example in the Bible where there was a prophet or a king of Israel that wanted to consult a dead prophet. I think it was Samuel. He's like, we need to consult Samuel, but he's dead. Can anybody contact him? And then whatever necromancer was in the church of Jerusalem was able to contact the prophet, a dead prophet, and find like he came and he said something like, why do you disturb me in my slumber? And they go like, we need to find out who's going to win this war. Should we go to war? And then he's like, yeah, you'll win the war. Go ahead, go to war. And so they go to war and they win. So it's just an example of necromancy in the Bible. Yeah, Yahweh condones necromancy in the Bible.
That's fascinating. Again, that's something that like, because today we're like, that's just new age bullshit, man. Like we don't do any of that, and it's like that is baked all throughout our scripture. But we write these things off because we're scared of them today, and for sometimes good reason. I think something to even make comment on that is that like. This was someone who was trained in this, right?
The best of the best. The what do you call them? The priest or something.
Right. This is not a random person, you know, in Encinitas on the street corner.
Kids shouldn't mess around with Ouija boards. Yeah, is what we're getting to.
Is what we're getting to. Right. There is, and maybe you've felt this too as you've integrated and you've had a deeper respect for symbolism. And I want to touch on that word occult that you mentioned, because I think there's some debunking that needs to happen around that word that you've already kind of done, you know, but it's like there is this discipline that comes, and there is spiritual maturity, and you begin to learn discernment. Discernment is a sword, and just like a sword, like it can, harm you or it can help you, and learning how to wield that sword of discernment in our life deeper, in a more, skillful way, I think is the same in spiritual matters. And so even like that, it's like I don't want to say progress, because now we're getting into hierarchy and things, but there is a sense of that.
Progression exists, I believe.
Yeah.
I think we're moving forward. And now it's a perfect segue into the flower of life.
Yes. So on this note, the flower of life, because this comes from, symbolism and things. People have been scared of this word occult, and it just means hidden. It means something that isn't. And this is what I think is important for people to understand, is Jesus, when he's speaking in the Gospels, is he continuously tells people, if you have an ear to hear, and what he's saying is consistently, you're going to have to tune into, and people hear this word frequency, they start thinking new age, but like your radio, like whatever.
It means if you're ready. If you have an ear to hear, I think it means if you're ready to hear this.
And tuned into this frequency of understanding.
What I mean.
Yes, because it will sound like static to people who are not tuned into this.
It will sound like blasphemy.
Yeah.
It actually sounded like blasphemy to the
Did
Pharisees.
it to you at one point in time?
What Jesus says?
Well, just like all of this stuff that now you're talking about,
I've always been open to other worldviews from a very young age. So, in fact, I've been so infatuated with other worldviews that there's this idea of being grounded and coming back to what is real in the middle.
Yeah.
Of your heart center of what's truth, what's like
right.
real.
Totally. So you have ventured into the world of symbolism and things. How has that opened you back up to the teachings of Christ in a maybe surprising way?
Super surprising, because you go into occultism and the Masons, Freemasons. And a lot of Christians think the Freemasons worship the devil.
Yeah.
They worship God. They worship Christ. They don't all worship Christ. I think it's like they say Freemasonry is open to anyone who believes in a higher power, kind of like the AA meetings. It's
right.
like, give yourself up to a higher power. So God's at the center of Freemasonry. And they're very
There's the G that's
G
in the symbol,
is
right?
Right in the center. Yes. So there's a compass and a square.
Mm-hmm.
And G is in the middle. The G is for God. And God is at our center. And that's what I believe mysticism really means for me, is that God's at the center instead of in space.
Right.
So if God's at your center, it's closer than you've ever known. And in alchemy, there's this saying, as above, so below. Mm-hmm. And in the Bible, there's this phrase that God created us in his image. And so as above, so below means God created the universe in the same way he created us. And there's this kind of mirror-like image of the heart is in our center, just like the sun is in the center of our solar system. And if you go back to symbolism, a lot of it revolves around the planets. Like the planets are all symbols for something. Mars for war, Venus for love, Jupiter for the king. Saturn is actually like death a lot of times. And the sun, Jesus is the sun. Like there's a reason words sound the same. And that's a lot of what I've been learning recently too, is like the etymology of words.
Right.
And whenever I came to current, I noticed you said a couple times, you're like, occult just means hidden, or heaven just means sky. You just like define the word, which is so helpful for people who are like, whoa, where's heaven?
Right.
Where's heaven? Like, where is heaven? Like, this is a really
some
big
existing place with my relatives.
Yeah.
And it's always the relative you liked,
yes.
Or your dog or so, it's again, I'm not saying bad things about that. That might be, but that's a narrative.
It's a narrative.
But this word doesn't mean the narrative we associate with that word.
It's a symbol. It's a symbol.
Exactly. It's a symbol.
So Paul uses the symbol of, what's it called? Being a, what's Jesus? He died for our sins.
Oh, yes. Like he's the atonement for our sins. Yes.
No, what's it when you kill an animal?
Oh, yes, he's the essentially the sacrifice. But
Sacrifice.
The lamb, yeah.
Okay, so in Paul's symbol, Jesus is a sacrifice that paid the debt for our sins.
Right.
Okay, so whenever I hear that, I go like, gross. Like, why do we have to kill a human? Why is there human sacrifice? But that was the worldview of the time. They killed animals as sacrifices for their sins. Paul is actually a revolutionary. He's saying Jesus is the sacrifice for our sins, not these animals. So he's actually changing something. And a lot of us give Paul a lot of shit because we don't want to go back to this whole sacrifice worldview. Like, it doesn't make sense in our worldview. We just don't use animal sacrifices anymore. It doesn't make sense to us. So I've been watching a lot of Aaron Abke.
Yeah.
And he talks a lot about the difference between Paul's theology and Jesus' theology.
Yes.
So Jesus talks about atonement through closeness to God and following the law, doing the right thing.
Right.
And then Paul comes along and goes like, don't worry about the law. As long as you believe in Jesus, then you're going to heaven. And then that just became Protestant Christianity.
Yeah.
And now we have this simple idea that believe that Jesus died and you're going to heaven after you die. Wait a second. Jesus never said that.
Right.
Jesus didn't say that you go to heaven when you believe that he died. So
right. Because how could this changed for me whenever someone said, and I was deep in like conservative Calvinism, Reformed theology at this point. Loved Luther, loved Calvin, love all these like very, conservative Christian, thinkers.
Theologians.
Yeah, Jonathan Edwards, and all these old school dudes from the, whatever.
All revolutionaries.
In their own right,
Yeah.
And it's like, so I was at a pastor's conference and youth pastor at the time, but we were planning on coming to California. And he asked me, what's the gospel? And I said, the standard, Jesus died in my place for my sins. And he said, that's not the gospel. I'm like, whoa, like, what do you mean that's not the gospel? I'm a pastor's kid. I've been told my whole life.
Pretty sure I know the gospel, man.
Right. And he said, if that's the gospel, what did Jesus came proclaiming the gospel. How could Jesus proclaim that if that had not happened yet? Mm-hmm. The gospel has to be, and he didn't deny that, he kind of like, granted, this was like many beers deep at 1 a.m. at a hotel in Ohio, which, don't let pastors fool you. We know how to have fun.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
At least, well, I'll digress. But, he said that's not he ended up later rephrasing, that's not the whole gospel. But his initial, that's not the gospel, is what woke me up. That sparked something. I needed to hear that.
So he wasn't in the world of Calvinism then?
He was more egalitarian. He was a vineyard pastor too, but he was more, not to bore people with all the whole like which side. That's such an old conversation of like predestination or free will and all this stuff. Like he was more on the other side of Calvinism, but was certainly evangelical Christian for sure, charismatic Christian. He came from a Calvary Chapel church before he came in the vineyard, and so anyways, he was just like, but that abruptness. And then he later was like, no, I don't mean that's not the he's like, I just don't think that's the full gospel. And that's
the
fine.
main point of the gospel.
The main point.
It's not the main point. And we make it, mainline Christianity makes it the main point.
Because Paul does make it the main point.
Yeah.
And arguably like you mentioned, for his people in his time, they needed to know that, because at Paul's time, Christianity was not its own religion yet. It was a sect of Judaism. It was not its own thing. So they're trying to figure out, what denomination of Judaism are we?
And he's talking to pagans. He's talking to the Greeks.
Yes.
And they are worshiping gods in a different way. And he basically had a story to tell them about Jesus, and it worked. He spread Christianity around the world. So.
Totally. And I'm grateful for Paul. And I just actually I got the final proof copy of Words Create Worlds today. And in the word gospel, I want to help people see the nuance of the two, because I think there's something important there. And I love revisiting Paul through this symbolic lens to kind of circle it back around that, because Paul's focus is the cross and this sacrifice. And so we have made Christianity all about the cross.
Oh, beautiful. Let me go off on this.
Please go for it.
The cross is straight lines. Rosicrucian is rows on the cross.
Yes.
The rose represents flowy, curved lines. And straight lines represent masculinity and curved lines represent femininity. And like Christianity for the past 2,000 years has been described as a patriarchy. And it has been.
Yeah.
It's all men. All men.
Yeah.
They worship the Father. No mention of the Mother.
Yeah.
So,
And they neglect Mary Magdalene, by the way, which that's a whole nother thing. But keep going.
they demonize the world. They say this is a bad place. We need to ascend to heaven where God is. That's the good place. The balance of our Heavenly Father is our Mother Earth. And this is not a bad place. And Jesus said, the kingdom of God is here in your midst.
Yes.
And so the Rosicrucians, they actually understood the symbolism of the rose on the cross. And the rose represents the flower of life. I'm going to keep saying it.
You just keep going. Let's roll right into this flower of life because it's perfect segue, dude.
Yeah, the flower of life represents God creating, because a flower blooms from the center, and mysticism is God at the center. The flower blooms. In the East, the lotus flower represents creation. The flower of life represents creation. There's 7 days of creation in the Bible. There's 6 circles around the 7th in the middle in this symbol that I made that is a variation of the ancient flower of life. The ancient flower of life is like 19 or 20 intersecting circles. But basically, going from the Rosicrucians, they understood Jewish mysticism. And Jewish mysticism revolves around the tree of life. The tree of life is at the center of the garden. Adam and Eve are told they have to leave the garden because if they eat of the tree of life, they'll live forever. The tree of life has the fruit of life, which gives us eternal life. That's salvation. The flower of life can be the fruit of life. Either way, that's blooming from the tree of life. So the flower of life represents salvation in that way. If you understand what's going on here, I think that's gnosis. That's the idea that the Gnostics had. Gnosis leads to salvation. So understanding like that God is at our center, and understanding that we can venture off into occultism, and we can venture off into this symbol, and we can venture off into space, and we can go into the caves, but coming back to the center is integration.
Yeah.
So the idea that you leave your church and you go into another worldview and come back to God, then you leave that and you go explore, and then you come back to God. God is the center because that's what the definition of God is.
Yeah, and even other writers say the anchor of our faith. Like there is a center. You can float around and remain in an anchored point.
Yeah, so Bob Peck and he talked about non-duality.
Yes.
So there's not God and the devil. The devil's not equal power to God. There is only one God, but there's a way away from him and a way back to him. And this is something I didn't get into with Bob Peck, but I've just kind of realized recently, it's like, what is sin? Like, if God is everything, then what is sin? Like, are we allowed to do whatever we want? Because you could be tempted to think that's the truth. Okay, God's everything, so God's in sin then as well. So if sin is like going away from God, then there's atonement, which is a way back to God.
Yep. And that's it. I mean, sin means to miss the mark. You know,
that's what you
it's
said.
It's an archer's term that was adopted. You know, this didn't have an origin. That's what I love too. We don't realize so many of the words that have become like holy and sacred and all this stuff. They're borrowed phrases from like real life things.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like even righteousness is in accordance with, and it was a term that would be, you know, in flow. Like you are following a woven path, like so you don't want to be unrighteous, you don't want to be off of this God path in your life.
Righteousness would be hitting the mark,
right?
If sin is missing the mark,
exactly. And it's like all of these words that just, you know, now are just like, oh, that's a church word. It's like not originally. No. This is about an archer not hitting a target, and it's
Jesus teaching is righteousness, you know, following the law. He many times said, like, follow the law, do what's right, do what's good, be loving to your neighbor. The whole of the law is just love your neighbor, love God and love your neighbor.
Yeah.
So if love God means come back to God, and love your neighbor means accept people for who they are and love them for who they are, because there's God in each of us.
Mm-hmm.
So a mystic also recognizes the God in you.
Yes.
Is the God in me.
That's it.
What a beautiful teaching.
It is. And it really comes back to, and I always bring it back to, like, I grew up learning about the priesthood of all believers. That's what I was taught. And to me, it truly actually honors that, because I was taught it's the priesthood of all believers. Essentially, everyone is a priest in this view. Yet we are falling under this patriarchal hierarchy of all of this high church stuff. It's like, this view helps people see that you can actually trust the Holy Spirit in you, the Spirit of truth, Jesus says, in you, to follow this pathway. And the only thing I think that, in my view, we're all vehicles of God, and I'd love to riff on some non-dual stuff, but like, if we're all a vehicle of God, the only work that I have to do as an official minister is to hand people back the keys to their own car. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm like, dude, you have this interconnected being with God, with the divine, and you have access to that. Sure, there's some ways that we can drop down in there. We can have tools to help do that. But ultimately, like, you are at the core of your being one. And when we recognize that in ourselves, we can't help but to start recognizing that in the people around us. When we start to see that pattern show up everywhere. I'm not a saint all the time, man, but all of life then becomes a practice. Mm-hmm. It's not just then in church whenever I say the right things. It's all the time is my training studio for becoming deeper in tune with that God that's within me.
Mysticism is like the antidote to the worst parts of Catholicism, because Catholicism has become this idea that you have to go through the priest to get to God.
Yeah.
Whereas mysticism is a direct connection to God.
Yep.
And also, Bob Peck's book is Original Sin is a Lie, because the original sin doctrine tells people you're a sinner. Mm-hmm. You are a sinner. I am a sinner. Like, what a horrible thing to say. I have sinned, but I am a beautiful creature.
Dude, come on. You're preaching now. That's good.
Yeah. Where we are at our heart is one with God. Anything that we do might be a sin or a righteous action. And that's this idea of the right hand and the left hand. Sinister means left hand. Sin also has to do etymologically with left hand.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Sinister means left hand, and righteousness is right hand.
Wow.
So there's two choices we can always make. A mystic also has usually experienced something mystical.
Yeah.
And what is mystical is a little bit different from mundane reality. And I'm curious to ask you, because I have you experienced anything mystical?
Dude, great question, especially for the Mystic Lens podcast.
Yeah.
But yes, I absolutely have had some far out supernatural experiences. Absolutely. I would say, though, the greatest takeaway from any supernatural or mystical experience always comes back to a deeper sense of love and intimacy with God. And I was just having a meeting with someone talking about some of these very things, because he was saying, I listen to this or that, and I meditate like this, I pray like this, and some of the far out stuff isn't happening. Am I doing it wrong? Whatever. And it's the reminder of the goal is not to have a far out experience. It's always to and from and to love. Always. From love to love. That's the whole motion, the whole movement, the whole arc of life is a learning school to integrate the reality of what love is, even whenever it's difficult and hard and painful and life is suffering. The first noble truth of the Buddha, that we've been talking about. It's like, yes. So I feel like I have to preface some of that, because sometimes we can be sent on journeys in search to
of
use
the truth that it's as if the truth is out there.
Right.
Again, it's
or
here.
some experience, some far out experience that
He's
I
gonna
need to have.
find the truth. Yeah.
And ecstatic experience, psychedelic even experience that I need to have, whether that's with a substance or not.
And most commonly people come back and they said, I had this like moment of enlightenment and all I felt was this overwhelming feeling of love.
Right.
They found love.
And a unity in all things. And that's ultimately any mystical experience should have that. And I think that, it's important to remember that because there's a book about Gurdjieff, who is a whole character unto himself, but somebody that wrote a book called In Search of the Miraculous. And this whole idea that we're consistently searching for a miraculous thing to happen, but the miraculous thing is here. And any miraculous thing, supernatural thing that comes out has to first be in the natural. And like I was talking to a friend this morning, if we're seeking any supernatural thing, the question first must be, have you become settled in and acquainted with natural life?
If you seek the end, have you found the beginning? God
Right.
says, Jesus says.
Exactly. And it's like, the first will be last and the last will be first and all of these very like paradoxical backwards things. And it's like if many people go on the spiritual path wanting something far out to happen to them.
Because there's a hole inside of them.
Right.
Because they're seeking to fill this hole, which is a deep connection with God.
You're right. And to your point, life in itself is that dukkha, unsatisfactory. That hole in the heart. Whenever growing up, evangelical, whatever, it was like there's a God-shaped hole in your heart, and it's like as cheesy and ridiculous.
I just came back and said it again.
As it is, it's true, but it's like the language I would use for it now would be like there is an unsatisfying sense in life, and satisfaction is available, and we seek satisfaction usually through, even if it's the lower chakra sort of things where it's money, sex, power, or we start to look for it in more supernatural things.
Or the upper chakras, which is intellectual.
We get addicted to information and knowledge. We get addicted to ayahuasca ceremonies.
The crown chakra is outside of your body. You think that the truth is outside of your body.
Right.
The 7 chakras represent everything in reality.
Exactly. And so to say, there's a big long preface, but like in search of a mystical experience, I think is the wrong posture of the heart. Mystical experience is a byproduct of natural reality. Supernatural things happen spontaneously from a deep, grounded, rooted sense of being in reality.
I think proper enlightenment is such an expansion that you feel connected to everything, but you're still right there in the middle.
Yes,
Again.
always. And so I've had some far out experiences, even in churches,
Me too.
being charismatic, in terms of falling out in the spirit and doing things. I still, I guess I'll let the cat out of the bag on this one. Dude, I still like speak in tongues and things, very charismatic stuff that's trippy, that people probably wouldn't expect from like some non-dual mystic guy, but like I still have that experience. My wife and I have had a couple like pretty far out experiences. There's one that was really moving, and I hope that this whole preface beforehand would help to bring shape to it, that this isn't necessarily the thing to be sought, but sometimes there is glitches in the matrix that happen and breakthroughs that happen that are supernatural. And I was at a point in time where I was feeling very discouraged from just all things spirituality. We had tried to start different church things out here a bunch of different times, a lot of failing, a lot of hurt, a lot of working in some dead-end jobs just to make ends meet. And like we moved here to do church stuff, none of it was working out. I still wasn't. There's all this stuff, man. And I was working at an insurance agency, and I thought, I'm just going to focus on like earning commissions, and that's all that matters to me. And I just hung up for a blip of time all spiritual pursuit and things. That didn't last for long, but I really felt like completely over it all. And I just stopped with everything.
You went down to the survival chakra.
Just down there, man. Yes. The root that is just like, I'm going to worry about the fundamentals. Yeah. The basics. The house over my head, the money that I can spend, whatever. And not like I was like making anything great. I've always been like well below lines that I should be at. Just so you know.
Well, that's when you have to focus on those lower chakras. They're important.
They are important, you know, but I was doing it from, again, to me, everything comes back to the posture of the heart. And my posture was just anger and angst and just pissed off about just what wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. And so I just made a decisive choice to just cut off all things, spirituality, religion, pursue God, no practice, no anything. And this lasted for about a month. And my boss loved it because my cold calling was just through the roof and all of that, you know, whatever.
You're performing.
Yeah, man. I was being productive and, you know, getting old leads to come back and all this stuff. You know, you're in sales too. You get
when you focus, it works.
Yeah. And but then my wife and I were eating dinner one night and the kids were playing in the living room. And we were at the table, and I think we made like pasta and had a little bit of wine, not enough to you know, solicit any of the stuff that was about to happen. We were sitting there, and what's cool is it happened to both of us. So it wasn't an isolated thing. But actually behind me, there's this bamboo thing by the front door. That was over by our table. We both felt this like sensation of the Holy Spirit on us. For a second, it almost felt like somebody paused time, and I was like in the living room looking at my family, and I was almost like that scene in Interstellar at the end when he's in the Tesseract, you know? And I was looking in, and I was like blessing my family from that outside lens. Somehow I was existing both places, but it felt like there was an opening portal to the side of me. And Lindsay witnessed all this too, you know? And so I'm not just a solo crazy person. And I don't like to lead with this story for a bunch of different reasons, because then people end up looking for this. But I digress. And this bamboo thing trapped me into where I was sitting. Like our table's over against the wall, and I had to physically move. It moved about 2 feet. I had to move this bamboo thing out of my way to stand up. And I was just moved to tears. And I just felt like in that moment, it's the thing that I needed for God to show me this whole thing really is a game. It's an illusion. It isn't really what you think it is. And I needed that to get back focused on what I feel like I've been called to do here. And now, granted, it's 2025 now. This was back in 2019. We just started Current last year. So there's been all sorts of stuff in the mix. It's not like things happened overnight again. Nope. I did start wearing a bunch of beads and stuff again and try, you know, you start to try to look outside of you. But
you were spiritual again.
Yes, spiritual again. But the point is that like supernatural far out glitches in the matrix happen. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't after that. I wasn't doing like holotropic breathing or whatever. I just was honestly at the end of myself. And that created quite literally, I think, a portal for a fresh breath of air to revitalize and to lead me not seeking another one of those experiences, but get me focused back on what's the aim and trajectory of my life. I was living in sin, right? Because I was not that I was doing anything bad morally, but I wasn't living in the center.
You turned your face from God, you said. You're like, I don't really need to think about God right now. I need to focus on work.
Right.
That's the sin.
Yeah. And I still, you know, we both still work and things, but like the point is it's for that reason. And so it's a mystical experience that can sometimes, and there have been other times since then, I've not had the far out. And I've been at my wit's end also. And so...
So you're right. People go searching for it. And then also, when you take a drug, you want to keep taking it and you want to recreate and it never recreates.
Yep. Alan Watts says when you get the message, hang up the phone when it comes to psychedelics, by the way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what about you? I mean, you brought it up. So I'm wondering if you had any far out things.
Yeah, I've had a couple. When you mentioned that your wife saw it as well, it made me want to talk about one where my wife saw it as well. That's so crazy. For someone else, it's not just in your head.
Yes, there is something
real.
Trippy there for sure about the nature of reality, man. Yeah. So what was that for you?
Me and my wife went out to the desert which is the place of doing things like this.
Yeah.
We went out to a rave in the desert. There were hallucinogenics involved, and we were looking up at the stars, and then all of a sudden they started swaying like they were hanging from strings. And it was like, whoa. I was like, whoa, do you see that? And she was like, yeah, they're like swaying like they're floating, or they're like just hanging from strings. And I was like, I didn't even say it.
Yeah.
She said it.
Yeah.
So I knew that she was seeing what I was seeing.
Yeah.
Is the experience where we both saw the same thing, which
That's
was
like a telepathic kind of experience, right?
yes. And that wasn't like a moment of enlightenment. That wasn't like a moment of like a connection with the world. It was just like, whoa, we both see something that is not part of the mundane world. It's just the reality that there's more than meets the eye, which is a really important thing to realize nowadays.
Yes.
And I think we understand that scientifically. Our eyes can only see a certain frequency, and there's other frequencies that are not visible to our eyes.
Yeah. That I think is kingdom of heaven. What Jesus is saying is in your midst. You know, it's a different dimension of reality that's available in here. And I love that you had that with your wife. You know?
So the spirit, chakra is above your head. It's outside of your body. It's those things that it represents those parts of the world that are outside of our perspective. Like spirits are invisible. Spirit means breath.
Yeah.
Let's go back to what the words mean.
Yes, dude.
Spirit means breath. Breath is invisible. Breath is also life-giving. And so the flower of life that I created has spirit at the top, body at the bottom, and soul in the middle. So we are spirit, soul, and body. And I had to figure out that spirit and soul are not the same thing.
Yeah.
Spirit is above, it's invisible. Soul is your heart, it's who you are. Soul is eternal, which is amazing. That's the gospel. The gospel is like you're eternal. You have the capability of lasting after death, and that's like an answer to our
Let's
prayers.
talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned about the soul being eternal, and that is, and then the body. From my understanding with that is like, we identify here. The soul is here in this body. So therefore we have personality, we have preference and aversion, we have the story, we have our family line, we have our culture, all this stuff.
The soul's not the ego, though.
Right. The soul is not the ego, but it can get mixed up as thinking it is. So like there's a book called Christ, the Eternal Tao. And it's actually from an Eastern Orthodox perspective that ties together Taoist, because Tao means way.
Right.
And it's, people are like, oh, I don't like that Taoism. You don't like wayism? Well, that's the only thing that Jesus said about his teaching was the way. So
when you define terms, you find the similarity in the Eastern. Chakra means wheel.
Yes. Right. I know. It's like, dude, it's so funny, these things that people are so scared of. In this book, he's talking about, and basing it on Lao Tzu as well, that there is this higher soul and lower soul even within a soul.
There you go.
And the higher soul is the one that is identifying with that upper part of spirit, and the lower soul is getting mixed up with, essentially thinking it is the body and all of the body's sense experiences here. And all of it's existing inside of you, and you have the ability to navigate that and live into, and behave and act and whatever in tune with whichever one that you, and the idea is growth, right? Growth into the higher, not necessarily in a sense of like, whatever, I'll leave that alone for right now. So I'm curious though, with that, from your perspective, would the soul then...
The soul's in the center. Spirit
Yes.
and body are above and below.
Right.
So the body is the ego. The body is what's living here.
Right.
We identify as white male. That's the body. The soul is eternal. It's not male or female.
Right.
So we have both a masculine and feminine side. So that's actually the right and left side of the flower of life.
Yeah.
It comes from the tree of life. The tree of life has a feminine side and a masculine side. And the tree of life influenced Masons. And so another symbol of the Freemasons is the two columns, Boaz and Yakin, the pillar of mercy, the pillar of severity. So mercy is the more of the feminine, the motherly, and the severity is the masculine, the fatherly. So on the masculine side, you have the planets Mars and Mercury. Mars is the men.
Yeah.
War. Mars is the god of war.
Mercury, communication, even voice,
Mercury,
power.
communication, voice, intellect, thoughts, logic. On the feminine side, you have Venus and Jupiter. Sucks that Jupiter is a male god because there's like 6, planets that are male and only one that's female. It's kind of imbalanced.
Yeah.
Which
is reflective of the era
of the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah. They just kept naming them male gods, male gods, male gods. So Venus is the only female planet.
Right.
So Jupiter is also on the female side. Anyways, so Jupiter can represent, for me, it represents words communication, because that's also a feminine aspect. Women are better with words. They're better at communicating. Men sometimes hold it all in. We're not in touch with our feelings. So one of the ways to develop is to, as a man, connect with your feminine side, which means to connect with your feelings, connect with your words, get better at communicating. The work for women is to connect with their power. A lot of women are taught from a young age to be subversive, subdued, quiet. Don't be a present. Don't be a, I don't want to say the B word, but
yeah.
If ever a woman speaks her mind, it's like, whoa, listen to this B word, right?
Right.
Speak your mind.
Right.
The work for a woman is to develop her power, her intellect, and then the man should be in touch with his feelings and his words and communication.
Balance is everything. We're balancing this flower, this tree of life.
Yeah.
So, and even in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus, there's a guy I was just with, he was saying, a friend of mine was saying that, that's a sexist gospel because it's talking about, and it's the last logion, where they asked the question, Peter asked the question about how could Mary be a part of us, if she's a woman, and Jesus says, I'll make her male, Yeah. But that's
what I mean. Make her male, develop her masculine side.
Right.
I mean, none of the Bible really talks about men.
And her authority. That Peter couldn't wrap his head around.
What's missing from the Bible is the teaching of men need to develop their feelings, their empathy,
Which I think Jesus is such a great, that's why I come back to this tradition so much, is it shows us an example for all of this in so many different ways. But on your point of the soul being eternal, because a lot of people do think when they go to heaven one day, they're going to be reunited with their family and loved ones, whatever. And when people ask me about the afterlife, I typically revert back to a saying that I heard once from a rabbi, and his disciples asked him, Rabbi, what happens after we die? And he says, well, you're speaking to a living rabbi, not a dead one. I don't know. I can teach you how to live life. And I can teach you how to live life with God in this moment. But beyond this is not up to me to teach you anything about that. And I just love the humility of that. Pastors could take a couple notes about that. We have this whole fabricated idea of what heaven is and what hell is and all this stuff. And it shouldn't be the
focus because, people are like, I just want to go to heaven. That's not the focus of this life. Life is the focus of this life. Heaven on earth.
Incarnational reality. But to me, where I'm at now, and I'll just be, I don't know. I'm a living person, and maybe I've been here before. Maybe I have. I don't know. But
you stepped out of your body in the kitchen.
Yeah, that's true. I don't, and I think that's giving me a breadcrumb into
a glimpse into the bigger universe.
Yeah, I like to think so on my most optimistic days. But I'm curious, I don't know that we actually take our personality with us, because the soul from where I'm at right now, and even as a clergy person, my whole life is about learning and exploration. And I think more people who are pastors and ministers should be more open about where they're still processing, all of this. And I just think for me, I'm like, okay, I think that soul that originated from spirit came into body for this vehicle to learn the refinement that needs to happen. That the only way the soul could experience refinement is through a body that understands and lives in linear time. And that's why it ends one day. And then that whatever this life is supposed to be, and however many lives I don't really want to get into those weeds necessarily.
I do. I was going to go there.
Okay, well, if you want to, we can, but I'm like, okay, but my soul comes into this body for a different sort of refinement, in my opinion. And
continual refinement. That's what they say. Well, if you've lived many lives, then you're continually refining.
Yeah. So that's where you're at. But so when you leave this body, though, you take the refining experiences and whatever that might be from our just kind of fun sitting on the couch podcast perspective.
I had a mystical.
What's your thoughts about afterlife sort of things based on if the soul is eternal, but it's in the body, but not identifying with the ego of the body?
Well, so this was the original mystical experience I was thinking of. So the most out there mystical experience I had where I saw the big picture was I actually saw what looked like a matrix of timelines. And Marvel Universe has many timelines. I think it's kind of like big in our culture right now, understanding there's a multiverse of timelines. And basically, I had this experience where I saw choices as alternate timelines. And if you die in one, then your soul can move to another. And it continually refines itself. Yeah, we're living people. We have no idea the big picture. I think God said to Job in the Bible, he's like, you don't know everything. Right. You don't know what's going on. You don't know what I know. Only God knows the big picture. But we can understand more. Like some of us know more than others about the big picture. And I heard you talk about like the bird's eye view.
Yeah.
Like take the view from above. And with my father taught me look at the big picture. And that line is like the one thing I remember most about the wisdom of my father. He was like, look at the big picture. Don't worry about the little things. And whenever I get a look at the big picture, I do believe that the soul is eternal, that whether we come back as another person or if we enter another timeline or if we go to another planet, who knows? Like what I know is that like Jesus promised eternal life. Which is pretty powerful. Other Eastern religions say that the soul is eternal.
Yeah, and it's going through different wheels, and we are in this life is samsara, and you are in this wheel of illusion, essentially. And the idea is that you reach nirvana, which would be heaven, and heaven or nirvana are not actual places that you necessarily go to. They're states of reality that you step into
that is more real than this reality,
right? And even eternal means not an endless timeline, but something separate from time itself.
Oof. Whoa,
right?
Separate from time itself. Maybe time doesn't exist in the eternal now.
Right? It can't.
Wow.
It can't, because here's the thing: time is limited to this. Even now, the light that you're seeing from every star is by the time it reaches us is a different time throughout space-time.
Didn't Jesus say when his disciples asked what's going to happen at the end, and he said, have you found the beginning that you want to find the end? Let those who have found the beginning know the end, or something like that. It's about coming back to a central point where there's no time or space. Yeah, we live in a space-time 3-dimensional world.
Yeah.
And like mystical experience can give you a glimpse that, oh, this is not all there is. So there's something more real. And
we feel that. And what comes back to me every time, and any authentic person who's seeking this life and seeking God and seeking the spiritual path, like regardless of necessarily what t-shirt it wears from a religious standpoint, you know, it's like we all have that in us that connects to that point.
Oh yeah, the best quote is Meister Eckhart. He says, "Theologians may quarrel, but the mystics speak the same language."
That's it, dude.
Wow.
That's it.
Whenever I heard that, I go, oh, because you were talking a little bit about losing your way, trying to find your way, and being really upset about, you know, what the heck? Like, where is my way? Like, this is not working out. I've been there. And then I wanted an identity. Like, I'm not Christian anymore. Crap. What am I?
Yeah, man.
So then you go through that moment where you're like, what am I? I'm not Buddhist, and I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not Jewish, I'm not Muslim, I'm not New Age. I don't like the idea of being a New Age person. And then somehow you and Bob and others have said, the mystics speak the same language. Meister Eckhart. Yep. The mystics speak the same language. Oh, okay. So Jesus was a mystic. He felt the oneness of God. He said, the Father's in me, I'm in the Father. I and the Father are one. He fits the description of a mystic, and we're supposed to be like Christ. I want to be a mystic.
Yes. And I mean, that's even, people say, well, what do you do whenever, you know, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. And I think we're going to do a Sunday service about this pretty soon, because it's important. A lot of people hit me with that. I'm like, well, that's only in one spot, you know, in John, the latest gospel. But what he's talking about is to live like he lives. That in contrast to the religion of the time, which is this very strict Judaism of rules and regulations, and, you know, people withholding blessing from others and withholding prayer if you don't buy the right pigeon and all this other stuff for sacrifice. And saying, no, I am the way. This way of living is the way of union with the Father. And Jesus was not talking about Hinduism. He was not talking about how he was different than Krishna or any of this other. Jesus is not making mention of that. He's talking to his regional understanding of religion from his cultural upbringing and that reality, and that this way of living, his way of living, is the way of truly living in union with God. And so I think people miss that a lot, because they want to say then Christianity is the only right religion. That's not what he said. And like to your point, that the mystics speak the same language. Every respective realized spiritual, you know, leader and revolutionary is essentially telling you that in their own respective cultures and traditions and rituals from their religions. And I just think that it's like, it opens the doorway so much for so much more, because it shows that there's humanity who all have a longing for God in our own ways. And it's not limited to people groups in certain places. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you mentioned like John is the latest gospel, and John writes different than the other synoptic gospels, and he writes in a symbolic way.
Very much.
Deeply symbolic way. The Gospel of John is the only one that starts out, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God.
The Logos, by the way.
The Logos. So John saw Jesus as this eternal Word. And like, I am is like the name of God. When Moses asks, well, who are you, God? Like, which God are you? Who am I supposed to tell the people? I am. I am. So Jesus says, I am the way. I'm one with God.
And whenever he says that at the burning bush, it's I am, and it's more technical understanding. It's I am that which I will be. So
Yahweh like means that, I think.
Yes, I am that which I will be. So it's like, well, who are you gonna be? Like,
it's not answering the question, God.
Right.
Tell me your name, God.
It goes back to always the invitation to go deeper, because I think we look for surface things, and we also, to use another Old Testament thing, it's like they're like, oh, we want a king like all the other kingdoms do, you know, and then they get Saul, you know, and all this, and it puts on this whole trajectory of just frankly, like distraction with like political things and with like, taking over other cities and like all this other stuff.
Oh, there's so much focus on the name of God over the past 2,000 years. I mean,
longer. I mean, it's always that, you know?
Yeah, Yahweh. We're not supposed to say Yahweh. It's disrespectful, apparently, to Jewish people. You can't say that word.
Right. Adonai.
Yeah. Dan McClellan always says Adonai. Mm-hmm. I was like, why is he always saying Adonai? He's not even Jewish. Oh, it's out of respect for Jewish people. You can't even say the word. There's wisdom there. Don't try to say the name of God, because you can't. You don't know the name of God. And Jewish mystics, they're the deepest mystics. Like, they know. It's where I was inspired with the Tree of Life. The mysticism that they understand, like symbolically, is like so like inspiring. The idea that like God the Father is unknowable, and in some ways he is. In some ways, because we don't know the answer to the question, like what happens after we die. We don't know. What is the size of the universe? Like, we don't know.
Yeah.
So only God knows, and like having faith and reverence for God is something I had to come back to. Like the idea of faith, I was really upset about for a long time. Guys, I don't want to have blind faith.
Yeah.
I want to know what really is going on here.
What was that experience like, coming back around to some of that? Because I agree, like reverence is something that has came back into my life over these years. Mm-hmm. And what was that like? Well,
first of all, the way away from faith was through Ralph Waldo Emerson, Transcendentalism. He wrote that there's no, more palpable truth than your own experience. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of wisdom there. Like, I trust myself more than the teachings of the pastor or anyone, any authority. They could tell me what they want, but maybe they're trying to control me. Mm-hmm. There's more truth in our own experience. Trust your own experience. It's like such a powerful thing. Like, some people don't trust their own experience. They're like, oh, why do I see it this way? That's wrong. I have to focus on the way I'm supposed to see the world. So there's a lot of wisdom in trusting yourself. But yeah, the way back was this understanding that like God is bigger than me, and I'm not all-knowing, never will be. No one is. Mm-hmm. And so you have to have reverence for God. And God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, mm-hmm. everywhere, all-knowing, all-powerful. And we aren't. So like, yes, God is in us, but we aren't God. Mm-hmm. That's an important thing.
Talk a little bit more about that, because a lot of people say with mysticism, and if people have accused me, they're like, how can you say that you are God? And I have a whole way of navigating that, but I'd rather hear yours.
Yeah, God is in us, but we aren't God. Yeah, you don't ever want to think, I'm God. That's the sin of Lucifer. Lucifer, his sin was pride. He thought, I am powerful. I could run the universe. We aren't. Like, we're not God. So like, having a little bit of humility is the antidote to pride. And pride is the sin of Lucifer. And I mean, there's a lot of wisdom there. So we should have pride in ourselves. And pride is a word that we throw around nowadays. Like, pride is good. We want to have pride in ourselves. Pride was originally like a sin. Mm-hmm. Like, so the way to navigate that is, pride is a lack of humility. You have to have humility. We use the word pride differently than they did back then. Pride was a sin. So pride was the sin of thinking I know everything and you don't. It's this like really negative worldview. Mm-hmm. If you're a prideful person, you don't believe anybody else. It's arrogance. So mm-hmm. arrogance is the new word for pride.
Yeah.
And coming back to the 7 deadly sins was also an awesome moment for me. Like,
fascinating.
Yeah, like pride and lust. There's 7 of them. Again, there's 7 circles in the flower of life.
In the chakra system.
7 chakras, 7 days of creation. Mm-hmm. So just in the past few days, since like having this deadline of having a podcast, I read that the number 7 is used symbolically in the Bible to represent wholeness, perfection. And since God is whole and perfect, then 7 has come to represent God. And in the book of Revelation, there's this idea that in front of God's throne, there are 7 lamps, the 7 spirits of God. And this idea of 7 is biblical, is what I'm getting at. And
Totally.
It comes back to the idea that there's 7 planets. There are 7 celestial, like classical planets, including the sun, the moon, Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. So the sun and the moon were planets to them, because planets were just the objects that moved.
Right.
You can see 5 visible planets with the naked eye, and you can see the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon also represent the masculine and feminine. And this goes back to Hermeticism. And the Masons, they have the sun on the left and the moon on the right. The sun is the father, the moon is the mother.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the balance is the beauty.
So we are going back to that, the idea that we are not God, because I would say we are, but there's an explanation for some of that. And so whenever I say that, we are God, what I'm not saying is we're the king or the ruler or the head honcho authority. It's not what I'm saying whenever I say that we are God. And that's because we have in a Western mindset very much still a monarch idea of the world. Even today, not to get political, but we really think that who the president is, like, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but I am saying that, like, might lose some people. If you've listened this long, though, just hang tight.
They're in for the long haul.
But yeah, so it's like, like we still have this idea that whoever we perceive to be at the top of whatever food chain that we're in makes a difference, for our reality. And it does to a degree, but also it doesn't also. But we have a very, again, monarch mindset here in the West. In the East, it's a lot more natural.
Individual focused,
Well, individual, but there is a natural collective idea. We're individuals in the West, and we're individualistic in the way that we relate to power and authority structures above us and what we are allowed and not allowed to do, because we are subject to the kingdoms of this world, or whatever it might be, the tyrant that is, usually. Very rarely are kings actually not a tyrant in some way, shape, or form. But we are, and I don't mean to hit on buzzwords, but for all sense of the word, colonizer, in the way that we own the earth, we own people, we own corporations, we own everything. And so when we say, I'm God, we're thinking, oh, you're thinking you're the CEO of the company. That's not what I'm talking about. That's a colonial understanding and a monarch mindset of the world. The other mindset, more of the Eastern mindset, is more naturally indigenous of the earth. We come from the earth, which is where we find even our own ancient tracings back, Judaism back to Genesis 1. At Adam is a being from the earth, from the ground. And that's when we're about to celebrate Ash Wednesday pretty soon. From the dust you came, to the dust you shall return. We are connected to this earth. We're not, and where we were given authority over it, but not in the tyrannical sense, but in a stewardship sense. Anyways,
Gardener in the garden.
Yes, which is why Jesus shows up at resurrection, and Mary thought he was the gardener. It's a whole nother topic, but it's all connected to earth, and the Eastern posture is more of that. And so whenever I say I'm God, it's more so like I am a leg on the centipede. That's more of the idea.
We're all co-creators.
Yes, so it's like I'm not saying I am. Paul uses language that Christ is the head of the church, and meaning. And the church is the body, And if you use all this in symbolic terms, and Christ meaning anointed, that there is this anointing that leads the body. And that's the head, that's the mind of Christ. And so if we follow that anointing, that mind of Christ, we are the body, which are the arms and the legs. And we even say, people in evangelical churches sing songs all the time, I'm going to be the hands and feet of the Lord, Yes. That's exactly what you are. I would even say the mouth too. Communication's a big deal with all this, hence podcasting and all of that.
Yeah.
So I think, so whenever I tell people, because a lot of people say, oh, well, you're not God. And I'm like, I'm not the head. I'm not the one on a throne, but what if that's not the only way of observing the world, is in this idea of a monarch mind? I follow the anointing leading of the head of the centipede as I participate in flow with all the other legs that is all of us. And we are interconnected with God. In the same way, you say my body even right now. But if you were to cut off my finger, that would be a separate finger. But as so long as it's connected to my nervous system, it's me.
You're allowing God to flow through you.
Yes.
Like may God's will be done.
Yes.
Through me. Yeah.
Even I say in, through, and as
me. Yeah.
Because as is important, not ass. Being an ass is sometimes important too. But as you, because you are the manifestation of God's holy ruach, his spirit inside of you.
Not just what we do, but who we are.
Yes. And tapping into the higher soul that's connected to spirit that then transforms the body experience so that we can live in true righteousness, that's here to learn how to love and to heal. That's what we're here to do.
Oh, yeah. One of the best explanations of how is God in us, but we're not God. One of these pastors in Portland, Oregon, really great. I had a great experience at this church.
It would be Portland.
Oregon. New Thought Center for Spiritual Living.
Oh my gosh.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Imagine inviting your friends to that with a mouthful.
Yeah.
Hey, come on down to New
Thought Center of Spiritual Living. There's too many syllables.
Current's a lot easier.
I like current. But what he said was we're like drops in the ocean. Like God is the ocean.
Yes, dude.
We're water.
And
Currents is water too.
Yes, and we come up and we wave for a little bit, and we go right back out. And so it's like, is the wave the ocean, or is the ocean? It's like, it's all of it. But I am subject to the will of God. I'm seeking to live subject to the will of God, but God has to live in me and through me and as me. And I'm not trying to say that I am
That's
God.
why I wouldn't say the wave is the ocean.
Right.
The ocean has waves, and we are like waves.
Yeah.
We're like drops or waves.
And then the doctrine of impermanence, just like the wave, we come and then we go.
Come and we go.
And it's consistent coming and going.
And the wheel, chakra means wheel. Wheel represents time. Mm-hmm. And time is
the wheel of time.
Is the reminder of, we live and we die. It's a hard reality. It's tough to accept.
So as we wrap up, this has been super fun. Mm-hmm. And if anybody's,
made it this far
and sticking with us, you may be absolutely tracking, and you might feel a little bit of like the Apple spinning colored wheel of like processing, and all of that's cool. Mm-hmm. I would say if you could, what you would hope, kind of the summary of our chat, some of it, premeditated, some of it not. A lot of it not. That's just kind of how I rolled, but very zen in that way. We're just kind of judoing through it all.
Going with the flow of the current.
Yes. But we did pre-think some of these things to hit. But I did want to, if you could give an encouragement to people, and maybe just like what you hope people take away from some of this based on you growing up in this Lutheran reality, venturing off into other philosophies, Philosophy-Talks, your podcast, and then ultimately integrating into a more deeper symbolic way. Like what would you hope people walk away with from this conversation as an encouragement?
I've had an overwhelming feeling of completion as I have been able to come back to some of the teachings of my youth and to integrate them. In only the past couple years, I've felt finally like, oh yeah, there is a meaning, a purpose. We are here for a reason. It's a beautiful feeling. There's a lot of horrible feelings that I felt along the way, including like hopeless,
Yeah.
And yeah, I do want to tell people that there's hope at the end of the tunnel, and that, you know, seeking understanding is a beautiful way to God. Like, if you're like, I don't understand what's going on, you're in good company. Most people don't. Most people in power don't. I think the mystics, a lot of times, they're not the ones that are the kings, because it doesn't make sense. Like, the mystics are the ones that understand so well that they understand that becoming king is a fleeting experience.
Right.
It's not the central focus of life. So what the flower of life again represents is, if you focus on career as the center, it's not. So career is part of your life. It's not the center. If you focus on romance and relationships as the center of your life, it's not. It's unfulfilling, especially if you're focused on sex and you're like, oh, if I have the most sex, then that's all I want. That's hedonism. Just that you'll soon find it's not, you're not satisfied, right? So there's this unsatisfactory part of seeking lust, one of the 7 deadly sins.
Right.
Seeking greed.
Right.
It's not the center. They're parts of life, but God's at the center.
Yep. Keeping God at the center, I think, is the way forward. It's really good. Chase, thank you for coming and being a guest on the Mystic Lens. It's not going to be the first time. You'll
Wait, it is the first time. It's not going to be the last time.
Wait, it's not going to be. Yes, it's not going to be the last time. It's the first time, but not going to be the last time. We're going to have a lot more of these. So thank you for your time and your wisdom. And
Thank you for having me.
It's been really good, man. Thank you.
Another thing is that I've been so grateful to find Current, a collective, a community of like-minded individuals. Like I said, when I was in Portland, I found the center of spiritual living. I was like, oh, that's cool. But then I came back to California and I was like, looking and looking and looking, not finding.
Yeah.
So,
well, thanks for that at the end, man. That's a fun caveat, because we created this space because we wanted to connect with people. And the truth is, like, the human species will always run in packs, dude. Like, that's just how we roll. It's how we're wired. And it's important that you find people to roll with. And if you want to, like, if you have any interest in the teachings of Christ and in living in the capital W way, then, like, you're hard pressed to find any of that right now. And especially in this polarizing time. And I'm just glad that you've found some friendship here, dude. I've loved getting to know you and your fam, and I just appreciate you. And thank you for having that little bit at the end.
Thank you.
Encouragement for people. Find community, dude.
Yeah, it's amazing you've done it. So sorry, I haven't said this before. Wow, I can't believe I went through an hour, but I didn't say it's amazing you've done it. It's something I've dreamed of doing. I felt like, well, if no one's doing it, then I should be able to do it. You know, if it's nowhere, then why don't I create it? Like, there's a need. I feel a need. I've talked to other people who feel the need.
Yep.
But you did it.
Yeah.
Dang. It's a hard thing to do. I've thought about it. Never made it past the ideation phase of that, like, formation phase of finding a location, getting people to come, getting the speakers up. Yeah, you're handing out flyers at the door and everything. It's a real thing you've created.
Yeah,
congrats,
thanks, dude.
You made it.
Thanks, man. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, it's just a container, you know, but it's got to happen. It's time.
Yeah, we all wanted it to happen. That's part of why it happened.
Totally. That's it, dude. That's it. So if at the end here, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, have more questions about symbolism or even the book that you've written and things like that, how can people get in touch with you as we end?
You can find me on Instagram at Chase Manary. I made a new Instagram called at Chase Mystic.
Ah, nice.
And so might as well plug it. I haven't liked or followed anyone on that one yet, but yeah, that's my Instagram, and that's basically what I go on all the time. It drains all my time.
Yeah.
Scrolling. I'm a millennial, so we're all about Instagram. Our parents are about Facebook. The kids are about TikTok. We're right in the middle.
Totally. If people want to pick up a copy of that book that you whipped up, where would they be able to find that?
Amazon. Yeah. Amazon. It's called The Cosmic Compass.
Cosmic Compass. We'll put that in the link below, the show notes and things. Thanks for joining me, my friend.
Thank you for having me.